Hi everyone. Welcome. Hi everyone. Welcome to Woodblock Wednesday. This is Elias Martin of Collecting Japanese Prints. I want to thank you for joining me once again, where every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, we discuss Japanese woodblock prints, paintings, and I'm happy to answer questions or address issues or things that you may have come across. And so today, I have something really interesting to share with you. I've gotten a lot of questions about, I don't know if it was my first video or the first couple of videos, but I did a comparison of several impressions of the same design by Hiroshi Yoshida, a Shinhanga woodblock print artist. And I got a lot of emails asking me how often does that occur and does that happen in other genres of Japanese woodblock printmaking? And so those are great questions. And to answer that question, I'm going to present three impressions by Kiyoshi Saito, woodblock print by Kiyoshi Saito. The print is called Milk, and they were printed at different times of his career. And I think it's really instructive to be able to see all three and discuss the differences. So let's go to the table and have a look. So the first impression of this design is a very early, rare impression. I would say there's maybe 2 to 3 impressions known of this version. As I said, the artist, his name is Saito, Kiyoshi Saito, or in the Japanese version, Saito Kiyoshi. And this was done in 1948. It was done in post-war occupied Japan. And Kiyoshi Saito, just to give you a little bit of information about him, he was actually a painter, an oil painter, and he liked to describe himself as a frustrated oil painter that turned to woodblock prints. And so he approached his designs in an interesting way. He would paint the design first, particularly in his early period. Later on, he does design prints through sketches and other means. But his early prints, he would actually paint the design as an oil painting and then rework that image or that design as a woodblock print. And this particular print is titled Milk. It's from 1948, as I said. And this version is really interesting because we see some really early different nuances that we don't see later on. And those nuances will become much more apparent. But what's interesting, it's a little girl. It's probably Saito's daughter who's enjoying a glass of milk, and she's sort of playing around and has a spoon in her hand and she's scooping up the milk. And in this particular impression, because it's so early and rare, we see a mistake here. There's an area of color here that is the color of the skin tone of the little girl. But what you should see here is actually the color of her blouse, not the color of her skin tone. It's kind of an interesting error that they committed here. And it's these really interesting small nuances that mean a lot to collectors. So in this impression, we also see a sort of a warmer, softer color scheme. Here the bow tie is pink, and it's really rough and loose. And on this particular impression, I'll like zoom in. You see a very early Saito signature, and with this K that has this kind of loop, and then you have this S that has this sort of sailor S loop. And it is very stylized. It's very tentative. But you know what's really important to see this K, which is very different from his other prints, and then this S, which is very different from his later impressions. So moving from the earliest done in 1948, we go to a slightly later impression. This was probably done a year or so after this early version. And now what you see is some really interesting changes. Number one, you see that he corrected the mistake in the glass here. So you actually see through the glass and onto the area of her blouse. Whereas before, we noted the error with the pink, the same skin tone as the girl. The other thing is he intensified the colors. This blue is very, very vibrant. It's almost like an electric blue, where on this impression, it's a darker blue. And in the background, the black is much more pronounced, where here it's flat and the blue really comes out. The other interesting aspect of the print here is the underprinting, the black that is underneath the red or brownish red is different from the original, where that you have kind of a brighter rose color peeking through. So that's kind of interesting. And of course, the background, the grays coming through. He printed this gray and then sort of this darker mustard yellow. Whereas in the earlier version, it's just a variation of the same color, and it's more about texture. So there's those nuances. But the most interesting thing that I think he changed is he worked on the face in a way where he standardized it. Where in this impression, the early one, this looks like it was sort of almost done by hand in the printing. It looks like he was trying to figure out how to compose the face, and the nose, the mouth, and the eye are very tentative, very soft, really interesting. And on this impression, he simplified it and standardized it. He added these lines that create a contour, and then the eye, then the nose, which is much less pronounced in this impression than the first state, and a little bit of an opening for her mouth. It's very different. And of course, the bow tie is a different color as well. So I'm going to move the camera out so you could see the difference. And just to make things more interesting, Saito created about 50 impressions of this design. Now, this impression is not part of the 50. It's sort of a trial that he was sort of working on for himself. So it's extraordinarily rare. This is part of the edition of 50. Now, on this impression, the paper that he used is a special presentation paper where you could see the silky strands of the inclusions of the kozo fiber throughout the paper. It's thicker than normal, and this impression must have been used for a very important sort of reason. It might have been included in a exhibition of some kind. And speaking of exhibitions, this design was one of the first that garnered him attention and recognition. This design received an award in 1948 in Paris at a print salon, and it received either the first prize or if they weren't giving out like first prizes, it was one of the ones that they honored as an outstanding achievement in printmaking. And so because it was a successful design, he completed all 50. And in fact, I think he made a few more beyond 50. But I wanted to show you one last impression of the design, which is very different from the one we just saw, though they share a lot of similarities in terms of the changes in the face. You'll see these lines are present from this change, though they were not there in the first state. But there's some more simplification happening in the face, the eye, the cheek. Now you can't even really make out the mouth. The nose is just a slight bump. And you'll also notice the printing technique it's looser. It's also very expressive. So if I zoom in on the milk, you see this sort of thick, rich white. It has this really sort of vibrant electric power to it. And this is done by applying a thicker type of pigment onto the wood block and printing it very quickly. And one of the interesting things I want to show is that the entire print is printed with a very different pigment. This pigment has a sheen to it. It has almost like a lacquer quality. And so Saito printed using these colors on, he did this on his most notable works to create sort of a different effect. And it almost gives a sense that it's an actual oil painting. And you see the artist here sort of experimenting, trying to connect his love and his interest in oil painting back to his woodblock prints. So when you look at it, this sort of really interesting texture, it almost suggests sort of brush strokes coming in and sort of creating the design in white, though this entire thing is actually printed. So it's really interesting. So I'm going to zoom in on areas so that you could see the really wonderful texture of the design. What's also interesting to note is he changed the bow color once again. So now we have kind of a bright red, where in this state we have the same color as her blouse, and in the first state we have this pink. The other interesting thing to note is the signature. Notice now the K does not have that loop, though we still see sort of this S with the sailor's loop. But that changes later on Saito prints, where it's more of a standardized S that almost looks like a small case S. He loses the loop at the top, and he does that, just about 1955 or so. So we're very close to it, because in this impression, he indicates that design was done in 49, though really it was done in 48. He started the edition of 1549, and then now he printed this work in 54. So if I had a 1955 or 57 impression, we would see a complete different signature. It would be much more standardized. You could still see this hand of the artist, where the other one almost looks like it's printed, though it's not. It's just kind of interesting. He signed his name so often that he really figured out the best way to do it. And then we have here some extra information that is not always on prints. And then, of course, his chopped. All of this is actually unique to this impression. He usually would just title it, and you would see this design made in 1949, printed in 54 on the later impressions. So moving back, again here, the signature, similar to that. So I would say this is about 49, 50, 51. And then, of course, this extremely early first state. And again, I'm zooming in on the signature with the K with the loop. You could see how different that is. So I'll go over the prints one last time so you could see the differences in all three of them. And so what I want to really emphasize is that though Shin-hanga artists and Sosaku-hanga artists were interested in creating designs that could be printed multiple times, they both were also interested in experimenting. Hiroshi Yoshida, as I pointed out in one of my previous videos, did a lot of that. And the Sosaku-hanga artists like Saito, who carved his own blocks, printed his own prints, and conceived of the design himself, was always reworking the design to either make it more successful in his mind, or at the, or just as from sort of the spirit of experimentation that artists like to experience. So that, he thought, well, I've made it this way, why not make some changes and make it this way? And so as a print collector, it's really wonderful to be able to sort of see the changes that the artist makes. And then put all these three together. Now, there aren't just 3 states. There are a lot more. I could have easily, if I had them here, I could have put out 4 or 5 that would show this print very different. But what's interesting in Saito's body of work, once he got to about 56, 57, he standardized his editions and they did not have these variances. And so you only see these variants from designs that were done in the late 40s. And so this is a really wonderful opportunity to compare a very wonderful, it's one of his top designs, a Saito top design in 3 different states. Well, I hope you enjoyed looking at the Saito prints. It was a pleasure to be able to show them to you and to discuss them. Feel free to send me emails, direct messages, or comments on the videos themselves. And I'm happy to address questions in future videos. I'm planning on some interesting topics in the coming weeks. So please I'm just getting a call. I'm also working on an exhibition of night scenes for my website that will be for sale. That will hit live mid-June, and I'll probably do an extended version of Woodblock Wednesday to sort of go over the prints, almost like a preview before they go live on my website. So if you're interested and you're interested in what we do, please like us on Facebook and follow us. We're on Instagram, and of course the website is collectingjapaneseprints.com. Thank you, and see you again soon.